The silence in the aftermath of the battle was deafening. The Xenoth warship had been destroyed, and the rift had been stabilized for now. But as I looked around, I knew the victory was temporary. The damage had already been done. I stood near the terminal, my gaze fixed on the swirling energies of the rift as it slowly began to recede. The Xenoth forces had been swallowed up by its immense power. But there was no telling what the entity's release would do to the fabric of space. Even though we had contained the rift, the truth lingered. The Xenoth would return, and so would the entity, if given the chance. "We've done it," Dr. Sato said, breathing heavily as she straightened from the terminal. "For now. But this isn't over. We've just delayed the inevitable." I turned to face the crew. Starbuck was leaning against a wall, wiping the sweat from her brow. Her rifle hung loosely at her side, but the tension in her posture was undeniable. Garrus had already reloaded his weapon, his eyes scanning the horizon. "For now is all we can ask for," I replied, though the words tasted bitter. "But we're not done, not by a long shot." The aftermath of the battle left the air thick with dust. We were standing in the ruins of an ancient civilization, a place that had once held the secrets to controlling forces that were now beyond our comprehension. We had survived the first wave, but the true threat still loomed in the shadows. The Xenoth were down, but not out, and the rift's energy was still pulsing, waiting for something or someone to tip the scales once more. "We need to find out everything we can about this place," Dr. Sato said, her voice steady, though I could hear the strain beneath it. "There's more here, something we're not seeing. These ruins, this technology, it's too advanced, too dangerous." Garrus nodded in agreement, "And the Xenoth are going to want it back. You can bet on that." "We can't stay here forever," Starbuck muttered. "They'll come for us. And next time, we might not be so lucky." I glanced up at the rift, still rippling in the sky, as if beckoning something from beyond. The energy here felt wrong, powerful, ancient, and now unstable. Humanity had tapped into something far bigger than we realized. "Dr. Sato, what else is there?" I asked, my voice sharp. She hesitated for a moment, her eyes flicking back to the terminal. I don't know. But the rift isn't just a gateway. It's a weapon that could alter space and time itself." I felt a chill creep up my spine. If that was true, then we had barely scratched the surface of the power that the Xenoth had been trying to keep contained. The idea that such a weapon existed made my stomach churn. "We need to take this to command," I said, setting my jaw. "This can't stay hidden. We need to warn humanity. The Xenoth will come for this. And if they're not careful, they'll use it to destroy us all." As we prepared to leave the ruins, I noticed a movement out of the corner of my eye. The Xenoth hadn't just retreated, they were regrouping, assembling their forces on the outskirts of the planet. Their warships were forming a tight perimeter, and I could sense the Xenoth preparing for a final strike. "We don't have much time," Garrus said, his voice low but firm. "They're assembling their fleet. We're sitting ducks here," Starbuck added. "We can't outrun them, and we don't have the firepower to hold them off." I looked back at Dr. Sato. She was still staring at the terminal, her face pale, and I could see the weight of the discovery bearing down on her. "There's one more thing," she said quietly. "The beacon wasn't just a signal. It was a call to others." I frowned. "Others?" She nodded, her expression grim. "The Xenoth weren't the only ones listening. The entity we awakened isn't the only ancient force out there. The RIFT, it's connected to something much bigger." I felt a pit form in my stomach. The implications of what she was saying were too vast, too incomprehensible. The Xenoth had been trying to contain a power greater than themselves, and now we had let it slip free. "Then we need to stop it. All of it," I said, my voice steady despite the fear rising in my chest. "We stop the Xenoth, we stop the rift, and we keep the rest of humanity safe." Starbuck stepped forward, her hand resting on her weapon. "How?" "The Xenoth are coming, and they're not going to stop until they get what they want." I met her gaze. "We fight." As the Xenoth warships descended, we made our final preparations. The shuttle was prepped for launch, and we gathered what little supplies we had left. I could feel the urgency growing with every passing second. The Xenoth would be here soon, and once they were, there would be no turning back. "This is it," Dr. Sato said, her voice soft but determined. "We have one chance." Garrus and Starbuck were already working on the tactical plan, setting up a perimeter around the shuttle. We were going to give everything we had to stop the Xenoth from reclaiming this planet, from taking the weapon, from using it to destroy humanity. The rumble of the Xenoth ships grew louder as they neared. The Xenoth soldiers began to descend, their armored figures encircling us. They didn't speak, didn't waste time. Their mission was clear. As I looked around, I saw my crew standing together. Each of us was ready to make our stand. The odds were against us, but that had never stopped. Humanity, before, and it wasn't going to stop us now. We make our stand here, I said, my voice steady. We protect this place with everything we've got. We were no longer running. We were fighting for the future of humanity, and for the truth we had uncovered, a truth that, if left unchecked, could unravel everything we had worked for. The Xenoth descended upon us like a wave, their firepower overwhelming. They came from all sides, their weapons blazing, their soldiers advancing with terrifying precision. But we were ready. We had no choice but to stand our ground. The fight was fierce. Garrus held the rear, covering our escape route, while Star took the front line, her shots ringing out with deadly accuracy. The Xenoth soldiers fell one by one, but for every one we killed, there were 10 more to replace them. I fired into the advancing Xenoth, my shots tearing through their armor, but it wasn't enough. We couldn't hold them forever. They were too strong, too relentless. Then, Dr. Sato stepped forward, holding her hand to the terminal. "I've got one last thing," she said, a grim determination on her face. "It's a failsafe built into the system. If I activate it, it could neutralize the rift permanently, but it will take everything. It will tear this place apart." I turned to face her, the weight of the decision heavy in my chest. "Do it. We'll cover you." She nodded, and with a final, hesitant breath, she pressed the final command. The ground trembled as the rift collapsed in on itself. The Xenoth soldiers tried to flee, but the energy surged, consuming everything in its path. The Xenoth warships began to explode, their engines collapsing as the rift's energy drained them of all power. In those final moments, as the ground cracked beneath our feet, I realized that we had done it. The rift was no more. The Xenoth were gone, and humanity, for now, was safe, but at a great cost. The planet shook one last time, the final energy wave breaking the surface apart. We were thrown to the ground as the station crumbled. I could hear Starbuck and Garrus shouting, but their voices were drowned by the deafening roar of the collapsing rift. In those last moments, I thought of everything we had lost, but more importantly, I thought of everything we had won. The silence on Vesper Station was oppressive. It was the kind of silence that gets into your bones, settling into the cracks of your soul, until it's all you can feel. I had grown used to it, or perhaps it had grown used to me. Captain John Shepard, the man who once led humanity's charge against the Xenoth Empire, now found himself alone at the edge of the galaxy, lost in the endless expanse of space. Vesper Station had been assigned to me as punishment. After the war, I thought I would find peace. But peace was a cruel illusion. The war with the Xenoth had taken so much, and the worst part was that they had never truly left. I'd lost everything: my crew, my friends, the future I had once envisioned. Now, my days bled together in endless monotony, a series of repairs, data logs, and routine scans, a slow march toward an end I couldn't control. I sat at the control panel, my eyes glazed over as I stared out into the abyss. The station's systems hummed faintly, a steady reminder of my isolation. The view outside was vast, empty, just as I felt. No enemies, no allies, just the cold, indifferent expanse of space. Then it happened. The console in front of me flickered. It was a minor glitch, I thought at first, one of the usual system hiccups that come with the station's age. But the flickering turned into a pulse, a series of strange, irregular blips. The comm system, long dormant, crackled to life. For a moment, I thought it was some kind of malfunction, another broken piece of old technology. But as I leaned in, I knew. This wasn't a glitch. It was a signal. I tapped the controls, adjusting the frequency, listening intently. It was a low, distorted hum at first, impossible to understand. But then, a voice cut through the static, garbled, but unmistakable. "They have a WOKEN, coming, for you." A chill ran down my spine. The voice was unlike anything I had ever heard. It was mechanical, artificial, but undeniably alien. And then, before I could react, the signal stopped. Dead silence followed. I sat there, my heart pounding in my chest. I couldn't move. The old comm system flickered again. There was more. "They have found you. Prepare." The transmission ended abruptly. My hands shook as I reached for the comms again. Nothing. just the cold emptiness of the station's dead systems. My mind raced. The Zenith. It had to be them. I had seen the carnage they left behind. Their cold, calculating war tactics. The war had ended years ago. Humanity had moved on. But clearly, we were wrong. The Zenith had always been out there, waiting, watching. And now, they were coming for us. I knew what I had to do. There was no time to waste. I had to tell the crew. If the Zenith were coming, there was no time for hesitation. I didn't bother waiting for the others to come to me. I called the crew into the briefing room immediately. It didn't take long for them to arrive. Kara Thrace, better known as Starbuck, was the first, her sharp eyes already scanning the room. She wasn't one for formality, always on edge, always ready for a fight. Garrus Vakarian, my second-in-command, entered next. He was as calm and methodical as always, his eyes flicking over me with a practiced wariness. Dr. Emiko Sato, our chief scientist, was last. She stepped into the room, a sense of purpose in her movements. Her brow furrowed as she pulled up data on her tablet. I could feel the weight of their gazes on me, waiting for me to speak. I was the one in charge now. But that didn't mean I wasn't afraid. The Zenith had haunted my nightmares for years, and now they were real again. The signal is real, I began, my voice steady, despite the pounding of my heart. It's not a glitch. The Zenith are coming. Starbuck crossed her arms, her usual smirk replaced by a skeptical frown. The Zenith. We've been rid of them for years, Shepard. This isn't like the old days. They've moved on, right? This signal, ... is just another broken system. This is no malfunction, Starbuck, I said, cutting through her doubt. I've traced the signal to Kepler22b, an uncharted planet in the outer system. It's a dead world, uninhabitable. But it's where the signal originated. They're coming from there. Dr. Sato stepped forward, her eyes wide. Kepler-2b. That's a nothing planet. Why would the Zenith focus on that? It's too far from any major human colonies to be of any strategic value. I shook my head. Maybe it's not about strategy. Maybe it's about something else. I don't like it, Garrus said, his voice cold and pragmatic. But I trust you, Shepard. If the Zenith are really coming, we can't ignore it. We have to investigate. Starbuck shook her head, still doubtful. You're sure about this? You think we should risk it all for some dead planet? I didn't hesitate. Yes, we're going. Now. The decision was made. The crew was on edge, but they trusted me. They had to. The Zenith were coming, and we didn't have the luxury of waiting for them to arrive. We had to take action before it was too late. The journey to Kepler-22b was tense. The crew was on edge, the weight of the situation settling in as the shuttle moved through space. The planet loomed ahead. It surfaced a cold, lifeless expanse. As we approached the planet, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were walking into a trap. Everything about this place felt wrong. Dr. Sato was monitoring the shuttle's instruments, her face tense. There's a faint energy signature coming from the planet's surface, she said, her voice sharp. It's coming from beneath the ground. Could be the Zenith's doing, Garrus said, his voice steady as always. It's more than that, Dr. Sato replied, her fingers flying over the controls. It's too precise, too controlled. This isn't just an alien presence. It's a weapon. I didn't like the sound of that. But there was no turning back now. As the shuttle descended through Kepler-22b's thin atmosphere, the surface came into view. Rocky plains, scattered ruins, and mountains that looked like they had been carved by some long-dead civilization. The place was barren, desolate. Yet there was something oddly mesmerizing about it. The shuttle hit the surface with a heavy thud, kicking up dust as the landing gear connected with the ground. The eerie silence of the planet was almost suffocating. The air thick with the weight of centuries-old secrets. We disembarked cautiously, weapons ready, every step measured. The ground beneath us felt cold and uninviting. But there was no time for hesitation. This is it, Dr. Sato said, scanning the area. This is where the signal originated. I nodded, my gaze shifting toward the ruins ahead. The beacon we had been searching for had to be there. Whatever the Zenith had been waiting for, it was buried beneath the planet's surface. And we were about to find it. The ruins stretched out before us, their ancient architecture twisted and alien. I had seen nothing like it in all my years of fighting. This was older than anything humanity had ever encountered. As we moved deeper into the ruins, the air grew colder, and the sense of being watched intensified. Something was waiting for us. I could feel it. We're getting closer, Dr. Sato said, pointing to a set of carvings on the walls. This is it. the main control hub. As we approached the entrance to the structure, the ground suddenly trembled beneath our feet. The entire planet seemed to shudder. A dark shadow passed overhead. I looked up. A massive Xenoth warship descended from the sky, its sleek, deadly form cutting through the atmosphere. The planet shook with the impact of its arrival. The Xenoth were here. The Xenoth warship hovered in the air like a dark omen, its shape sleek and menacing. The roar of its engines echoed through the atmosphere as it descended, cutting through the thin air of Kepler22b. The ground beneath our feet trembled, as if the planet itself was reacting to the arrival of the alien force. "Stay alert," I said, my voice tight with urgency. The Xenoth were here, and they had come for the weapon. There was no other reason for their arrival. The ancient alien beacon had been activated, and it was pulling them in like moths to a flame. Starbuck, her rifle in hand, scanned the sky nervously. "We can't take them head-on. They'll wipe us out before we even get close." Garrus Eva, the tactician, surveyed the situation. "We need to move quickly, find cover. The Xenoth will come for us, but they won't know what we're after if we stay one step ahead." Dr. Sato was scanning the alien tech they had uncovered. "There's a control hub buried deep beneath the ruins. If we can access it, we might be able to manipulate the beacon, maybe even shut it down. But we'll need to act fast before they figure out what we're doing." The urgency in her voice was clear. The Xenoth weren't here just for a casual visit. They had come for the weapon, and they would stop at nothing to reclaim it. If we couldn't act quickly, humanity's only hope for survival would be lost. We moved forward, weaving through the ruins, doing our best to stay out of sight. The ground beneath us was uneven, the jagged rocks and ancient structures offering little cover. The Xenoth warship hovered above, its presence a constant reminder that time was running out. We found our way into a large cavernous chamber beneath the ruins. Dr. Sato quickly began working on a terminal, trying to access the control systems of the ancient technology. The air in the room was thick with the smell of dust and rust, and the flickering lights from the alien consoles only added to the oppressive atmosphere. "Keep your heads down," I whispered. The sound of heavy boots echoed from the entrance, followed by the distinctive mechanical clank of Xenoth soldiers. They were on the ground now, armored, methodical, and deadly. Their black exoskeletons gleamed with lethal precision as they scanned the area, searching for anything or anyone who dared oppose them. Starbuck crouched beside me, her eyes narrowed. "We need to move before they find us." "I know," I muttered, my gaze fixed on the Xenoth soldiers as they moved past the entrance. My heart pounded in my chest. I had led soldiers into battle before, but this felt different. We were outmatched, outgunned, and outnumbered. Garrus had already taken position, covering our rear as we moved deeper into the chamber. He glanced at me. "We'll need a distraction, something to draw them away from here long enough for us to finish what we came for." I nodded. "I'll take care of it. You two keep working. I need that control system online now." As I made my way toward the entrance, I could hear the Xenoth soldiers getting closer. The tension in the air was unbearable. Every second felt like an eternity. I reached the entrance of the chamber, staying low. The Xenoth soldiers were stationed just outside, unaware of our presence. I knew I had only one shot at this. A sudden burst of energy erupted from the wall, a loud, disorienting noise, and the Xenoth soldiers turned in alarm. Starbuck and Garrus seized the moment, opening fire on the soldiers. The room erupted into chaos. Laser fire cracked through the air, and the Xenoth returned fire with terrifying accuracy. Their weapons were far more advanced than ours, but we had the advantage of surprise. I sprinted back to the control hub, hoping that Dr. Sato had made progress. As I entered the chamber, I saw her typing furiously, her fingers moving at a speed that left me in awe. The terminal was alive with alien symbols, and I could tell she was getting closer to cracking the system. "They know we're here," she said, glancing up for a brief moment. "If we don't act fast, the weapon will be activated automatically. We're running out of time." I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. "What's the plan?" Dr. Sato nodded. "I'm going to reroute the system's power. We'll use the beacon's energy to create a disruptive field that will disable the Xenoth's weapons. It's a long shot, but it's our only chance." I felt the pressure mounting. The Xenoth soldiers were closing in on our position, and we had no idea how long the field would hold. If it failed, we would have to fight our way out, and with the Xenoth fleet already in orbit, that was a fight we couldn't win. Chapter 8. The Unforeseen Consequences. Just as Dr. Sato's fingers hovered over the final command, A loud mechanical noise reverberated through the chamber. The alien beacon began to glow brighter, its energy levels surging. The air in the room seemed to thrum with power. I looked up in alarm. "The field is activating," Dr. Sato said, her voice tinged with fear. "But something's wrong. The energy output is too high. It's going beyond what I anticipated." The ground shook beneath us, and I grabbed the edge of the control panel to steady myself. Starbuck cursed under her breath as the Xenoth soldiers outside began pounding on the door. They knew we were in here. They knew what we were trying to do. Suddenly, the entire room flickered, and a shockwave of energy blasted outward from the beacon. I barely had time to react as the world around me began to warp. The Xenoth weapons were disabled, but something else had happened. The energy from the beacon had opened a dimensional rift, creating a tear in space-time itself. The room filled with a deafening roar, and for a brief moment, I could feel reality itself twisting. The Xenoth soldiers outside staggered as they were thrown back by the force of the rift, their bodies disintegrating in the intense energy field. "We've done it," Dr. Sato gasped, her eyes wide with disbelief. But as the rift began to stabilize, something else emerged from it, something far worse than the Xenoth. A shadow stretched across the rift, an ancient cosmic entity, one that had been dormant for millennia, awakened by the beacon's power. We had made a grave mistake. As the rift expanded, I could see it clearly now. The ancient entity that had been sealed away for eons was coming through, its vast form moving with a chilling grace. It was like nothing I had ever seen before, a being of pure, raw energy and power, its very presence warping the space around it. The Xenoth, terrified of what they had unleashed, began to retreat. But we weren't safe. This being was not of their making, nor ours. It was something beyond comprehension, something older than the stars. The creature spoke, its voice a low, rumbling sound that echoed in the minds of everyone present. "You have awakened me. Now, you will see what it means to face true power." I turned to the team, my heart sinking. The Xenoth had come for one thing, but now, it seemed we had all unleashed a far greater evil. "We need to leave," Starbuck said, her voice tight. "Now." But I knew we couldn't. We had made a choice, and now we had to face the consequences. The creature that emerged from the rift was beyond anything I could have imagined. Its form was not solid, but instead a swirling mass of energy, pulsing and fluctuating with unimaginable power. Its shape flickered between ethereal outlines, an impossible vision that seemed to defy the natural laws of the universe. For a moment, everything around us seemed to still, as though the very air had been stolen away. My heart pounded in my chest. This was no ordinary alien force. This was an ancient entity, something that had been locked away for eons, now unleashed by the power of the Xenoth's ancient weapon. The ground beneath us rumbled as the air grew, thick with pressure, a weight that was impossible to escape. The Xenoth forces, once so confident in their superiority, scattered in panic. They weren't just afraid, they were terrified. The entity spoke, its voice reverberating through the rift, a low alien sound that resonated deep within my mind, curling around my thoughts like an invasive virus. "You have broken the seal," the entity intoned. "Now, you will face the consequences." I felt the words like a physical blow, and before I could react, the very fabric of reality seemed to warp. The air shimmered, and the ground beneath my feet buckled, as if the planet itself was trying to fight against the rift's presence. "What is this thing?" Starbuck muttered, her voice filled with both awe and terror. Her rifle was raised, though I knew it wouldn't do a thing to this entity. This was something beyond anything we had ever encountered. I turned to Dr. Sato, but she was staring at the rift, her eyes wide with a mix of fascination and dread. "It's a god, a being of unimaginable power. It was sealed away long before the Xenoth ever rose to power. ... Double quotes, she paused, swallowing hard. This ... This is what they were trying to prevent." I looked back at the entity, its swirling form now fully revealed. It hovered just above the ground, sending waves of energy cascading through the ruins. The Xenoth had always been ruthless, calculating, but this was different. This wasn't a war. This wasn't even a fight. This was something much worse. "We have to stop it," I said, my voice tight with urgency. "If we don't, it will consume everything." The Xenoth were right to fear this thing. The Xenoth soldiers were now retreating, some scrambling back to their warships, others attempting to regroup and organize. But the new threat, the ancient entity, was far more pressing than any Xenoth force. The rift it had created distorted everything in its path. The laws of physics themselves seemed to falter. Time and space were no longer stable. Spoke up, his voice calm despite the chaos. We're not going to be able to fight this thing. It's too powerful. We need to find a way to contain it. But I knew we couldn't just run. This wasn't a battle we could fight with conventional tactics. We had no weapons strong enough to fight this creature. We were all standing at the edge of a chasm, looking into the abyss, and we had no idea how deep it went. Dr. Sato, eyes wide with terror, began typing furiously at the control terminal, trying to make sense of the alien technology that had activated the rift, the signal, the beacon. It was all connected. The weapon we had uncovered wasn't just a weapon. It was a key, a lock, and now it was broken open. I have to disable the rift, she said, her voice trembling. If I can just reroute the energy from the beacon, I might be able to reverse it. But I'll need time. I nodded. We'll cover you. The Xenoth was still scattered around the ruins, trying to recover from the shockwave caused by the rift's activation. But they weren't retreating. They were gathering. They knew this was their last chance to reclaim control of the situation. I turned to Starbuck and Garrus. Get to the front entrance. Keep the Xenoth away from Dr. Sato. Starbuck grinned, though there was an edge of fear in her eyes. Don't have to tell me twice. Garrus gave me a curt nod, already moving to take position at the door. They would hold the line while Dr. Sato worked. But time was running out. The entity was growing stronger by the second, its energy rippling through the air like an invisible storm. As I moved to join Starbuck and Garrus, I glanced back at Dr. Sato. Her hands flew over the terminal, the alien technology responding to her commands. But it was clear she was struggling. The rift wasn't just warping space and time. It was actively fighting back. You are fools. The entity's voice boomed once more. It was no longer a whisper but a thundering roar, as though the entire universe was speaking through it. You have unleashed me. There is no escaping what is to come. The ground cracked beneath our feet. Energy surged through the ruins like a living thing, and for a brief moment, I thought I felt the rift stretching its tendrils toward me, trying to draw me into its depths. It is too late for you, the entity continued, its voice echoing through my mind. You will not stop what has already begun. I grit my teeth. We couldn't let it win. I fired my weapon at the advancing Xenoth soldiers, hoping to buy Dr. Sato enough time to finish her work. Starbuck was beside me, her shots precise and deadly, picking off Xenoth one by one. Garrus, ever the tactician, moved silently through the shadows, cutting down the alien soldiers as they tried to flank us. The rift above us continued to grow, its energy surging uncontrollably. I could feel the Xenoth closing in, but I didn't care. We were humanity's last line of defense. We couldn't let them have the rift. We're running out of time. Dr. Sato shouted from behind the console. I turned to see her frantically, typing, sweat dripping down her face as she tried to contain the energy surge. The air in the chamber grew thick with power, and I could feel the tension in my body, every muscle ready to snap. The Xenoth had regrouped. A new wave of their soldiers charged, but this time, something had changed. There was a fire in their eyes. They weren't just fighting for the beacon, they were fighting for their very survival. And then, amidst the chaos, I heard a low rumble, followed by an eruption of sound. The Xenoth warship had activated its weaponry, and now, a bombardment of energy blasts rained down from above, crashing into the ruins. We can't hold out much longer, Garrus yelled over the comms. I turned to Dr. Sato, my heart racing. How much longer? Just a few more seconds, she replied, her voice strained. I'm almost there, ... The Xenoth forces were pushing forward, their weapons drawn, and I knew we were running out of time. We were on the verge of losing everything. Starbuck's gunfire echoed through the chamber, while Garrus moved to cover the rear. The Xenoth were relentless, their soldiers advancing steadily, forcing us into a tight corner. The rift above us continued to pulse with power, its energy surging out of control. We have to stop them, I shouted, desperate. But Dr. Sato was still working, her fingers flying across the terminal as she struggled to redirect the energy. Looked at my crew. This was it. The final stand. The Xenoth surged forward, their weapons blazing. I stepped forward, my gun raised. For humanity, I whispered. The next moments were a blur of gunfire, explosions, and chaos. The air was thick with the crackling energy from the rift, and the world around us seemed to tremble with each passing second. Just as the Xenoth reached the console, Dr. Sato slammed her hand down on the final control. There was a deafening sound. As the rift began to close, its energy subsiding, the Xenoth forces halted, their weapons falling limp. The rift had been contained. The hum of energy began to subside as the rift in spacetime stabilized. For a brief moment, there was silence. The chaos that had filled the chamber, the warship's bombardment, and the terrifying presence of the entity. All of it seemed to vanish. The air was thick with the aftershock of the rift closing, and I could feel the weight of the tension lifting. Just for a moment, I stood still, catching my breath. My heart still hammered in my chest, and my muscles were tight with the adrenaline of the battle. But the silence felt unnatural. It was too quiet. "Is it over?" Dr. Sato asked, her voice trembling. She stood by the terminal, her hands still shaking from the intensity of what had just transpired. "Did we succeed?" I looked at the rest of the crew. Starbuck was scanning the horizon, her rifle still raised, while Garrus adjusted his scope, keeping an eye on any incoming threats. "We've stopped the rift," I said, though even I didn't believe it. "But I don't think this is over." As I spoke, the ground trembled beneath our feet. The planet seemed to groan, as if it were waking from a long slumber. And then, the signal came again, faint at first, but unmistakable. A low hum, followed by words that reverberated in my mind. "You cannot stop what has already begun." The voice was different this time, more distant, more powerful. "What the hell was that?" Starbuck whispered, her eyes wide with shock. "Is that the Xenoth?" "No," I said, shaking my head. "That's not the Xenoth. It's something worse." We hadn't just activated the rift. We had opened a door to something far beyond the Xenoth's understanding. The ancient entity was not just a powerful being, but something that had existed long before the rise of the Xenoth or humanity. We had unknowingly freed it from its prison, and now it was awake. Dr. Sato looked horrified. "We didn't just close the rift," she said in disbelief. "We contained it. But not for long." "What do you mean?" Garrus asked, his voice low. "We stopped the rift from opening, didn't we?" Dr. Sato turned to him, her face pale. "The entity didn't just live in that rift. It was the rift, and by activating it, we've weakened the barrier between worlds. The Xenoth didn't even know this thing existed. Now, it will return to its full power." Starbuck stepped forward, her gaze hard. "So, what? We just let this thing loose again?" I met her gaze, my mind racing. The truth was clear. We couldn't fight the entity. It was too powerful, too ancient. And the Xenoth, as dangerous as they were, couldn't handle this force either. We had unleashed a cosmic force that was far beyond our comprehension. "We need to get off this planet," I said, my voice firm. "We've done enough damage here. The Xenoth may be scared of this thing, but if we stay here, we risk everything." Dr. Sato nodded, but there was something else in her eyes. Something I couldn't quite read. "We're not leaving yet," she said, turning back to the terminal. "I have one more thing to try. If I can stabilize the rift again, we might still be able to contain it." "Contain it?" Starbuck asked. "Are you serious? How do you expect to do that?" Dr. Sato's fingers flew across the console, her brow furrowed in concentration. "I'm not sure. But the weapon we discovered, here it's part of something much bigger. If I can access the full database, maybe we can reverse the rift's effects and prevent the entity from reaching its full power." I felt a cold weight settle in my chest. If there was any hope of saving humanity, Dr. Sato was our last chance. But even as I trusted her skills, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were running out of time. Suddenly, the ground rumbled again. This time, it wasn't just a tremor. It was a shockwave, powerful enough to send us stumbling off balance. A deep roar shook the atmosphere, and I looked up to see a massive Xenoth warship descending rapidly toward the planet's surface. "They're back," Starbuck said, her voice tight with anger. "We can't outrun them this time." The ship's massive form loomed above, casting an eerie shadow over the ruins as it landed. Xenoth soldiers began pouring out, their armor gleaming in the dim light. They had come to reclaim the weapon. They had come to finish what we had started. The moment the Xenoth stepped onto the planet, they began to move toward the rift. They had realized that the entity was now fully awake, and they were not about to let humanity control it. "We have to stop them," I said, my voice low. "We can't let the Xenoth control the rift. If they do, it will be the end for all of us." Garrus was already preparing for battle. "We hold them off. You get Dr. Sato to the terminal." Starbuck nodded, tightening her grip on her weapon. "I've got your back." The Xenoth soldiers moved quickly, their sharp eyes scanning the area for any sign of resistance. They had advanced technology, weapons that could tear through our defenses in seconds. But they were still just soldiers, and we were humans. We had something they didn't: resourcefulness. We moved quickly, setting up a defensive perimeter. I watched as Starbuck worked with Garrus, coordinating a series of tactical maneuvers to funnel the Xenoth forces into a kill zone. Dr. Sato continued her work at the terminal, her face illuminated by the flickering alien data on the screen. Almost there, she muttered to herself, her fingers moving faster than I could track. But I could see the sweat on her brow. The pressure was getting to her. The Xenoth soldiers finally reached the terminal, and I knew it was time. I raised my weapon and took aim. The battle erupted. The first Xenoth soldier fell, and we were off. The Xenoth retaliated with their devastating plasma weapons, but our human ingenuity and unpredictability were our advantage. We fought with everything we had, pushing them back inch by inch. The rift above us flickered with energy, and I could feel the tension in the air. We were on borrowed time. Dr. Sato's voice broke through the chaos. I've got it. The ground shook again, but this time, it wasn't the Xenoth attacking. It was the energy from the rift. It surged violently, but Dr. Sato had stabilized it. For now. But we weren't out of danger yet. The Xenoth forces were relentless. The rift was still unstable, and the ancient entity had not yet been fully contained. The battle raged on, as humanity fought for survival against an overwhelming force. The warship above us loomed larger with each passing second. The air crackled with energy as the Xenoth soldiers pushed forward, their weapons blazing with precise and devastating fire. We were outnumbered, our position weak, but the human spirit had always been our greatest strength. I could hear Starbuck barking orders as she took cover behind a rock formation, firing at the advancing Xenoth soldiers with deadly accuracy. She was a force to be reckoned with. I could almost hear the smirk in her voice as she taunted the enemy. "You think you can stop us?" Starbuck shouted, her rifle's barrel glowing with energy. "Focus fire on their weaponry," Garrus commanded, keeping his tactical sense sharp. His rifle was methodical, precise. He knew where to strike, where to kill. Every move was calculated to hold the line. Dr. Sato's frantic voice rang out from the terminal. "We've stabilized the rift, but it's not enough. I need more time." I turned back to her, but the words caught in my throat. The Xenoth warship was closing in on our position. The rift above us flickered violently, its energy surging in waves. If it ruptured again, if the entity fully emerged, there would be no way to stop it. "We can't give you more time," I shouted over the comms. "Hold them off. If the rift destabilizes again, it'll tear us all apart." The Xenoth soldiers closed in. Their advanced plasma rifles tore through our defenses with frightening ease. But we kept moving, fighting, using the terrain to our advantage. The Xenoth warship's weapons fired a barrage of plasma bolts, shaking the ground and rattling the ruins around us. "They're preparing a full assault," Garrus said, eyes fixed on the warship. "If they get any closer, we're done." I felt the weight of the situation pressing in on me. There was no way we could win this fight. The Xenoth were too powerful, their technology far beyond ours. And now, with the rift threatening to collapse space-time itself, we were running out of options. It wasn't long before I realized that we were losing ground. The Xenoth forces were advancing with military precision, their laser cannons clearing any cover we tried to find. We had been pushed into a corner, with nowhere to go. But then, as if the planet itself responded to the growing conflict, the rift above us flared with an intense light. The energy within the rift was unstable, too volatile for any of us to comprehend. A pulse of raw, uncontrollable power shot outward from the rift, slamming into the Xenoth soldiers with an unholy force. I looked up at the rift, my heart racing as the energy cascaded in unpredictable patterns. The energy wasn't just random, it was alive. It was almost as though the entity was speaking to the planet. Or perhaps to the rift itself. "It's not closing," Dr. Sato shouted. "The rift is growing. If I don't get full access to the system, the rift will tear through everything. It will expand, and we'll be swept into another dimension." A roar echoed from the rift, like the scream of some ancient beast. The air felt thick, charged with power, and the temperature dropped. A tornado of energy formed inside the rift, its swirling tendrils of energy reaching out toward the surface. The Xenoth soldiers, momentarily stunned by the unexpected force, began retreating, but I could see it in their eyes. They didn't fear the power of the rift. They feared what would happen if the rift was left unchecked. "They're scared," I muttered, turning to Garrus. "They know what this thing can do. And if we don't stop it, everything will be destroyed." I ran toward Dr. Sato, my pulse pounding in my ears. The rift's energy was too chaotic, too wild. The Xenoth had no idea what kind of Pandora's box they had opened, and neither did we. How much longer? I shouted, desperation creeping into my voice. I'm close, Dr. Sato responded, her voice strained. But I need access to the primary control panel in the center of the ruins. It's the only way to fully shut it down. I nodded. Starbuck, Garrus, we're moving out. We made our way toward the center of the ruins, using the shifting landscape to stay out of sight. The Xenoth soldiers had regrouped, and now they were coming for us, with reinforcements. The battle was escalating into chaos, and I could feel the weight of every decision pressing down on me. As we approached the control panel, I glanced back at the rift. It had grown larger, and now its tendrils were twisting, reaching for us. The entity was fighting against the confines of the rift, its massive form stretching into our dimension. It was trying to break through, to free itself. We need to hurry, I said, as we moved closer to Dr. Sato's destination. The Xenoth launched their final assault. The moment we reached the control panel, an explosion rocked the ruins. The Xenoth warship had fired another round at the center, and the resulting shockwave sent us flying. Get to cover, Garrus yelled, as a wall of debris shot through the air. We ducked behind the nearest structure, shields up. As the Xenoth soldiers closed in, Dr. Sato was still at the terminal, fingers flying over the controls. Her face was pale, her body shaking with the strain of the task she had set herself. I can do this. I just need a few more seconds, she muttered, barely audible over the gunfire. But time was something we didn't have. The Xenoth soldiers were almost upon us. Their weapons raised, but I wouldn't back down. I couldn't. We're out of time, I said, my voice low but resolute. I turned to Starbuck and Garrus. We hold the line, no matter what. Starbuck grinned, her eyes alight with a fierce determination. Wouldn't have it any other way. Garrus nodded, his rifle raised. Ready when you are? I glanced at Dr. Sato once more. How much longer? I'm almost there, she said, her voice tight with focus. One more, before she could finish. The world around us erupted. The Xenoth soldiers poured in from all sides, and the rift's energy flared, its powers surging once more. We were locked in a deadly standoff, humanity's last hope hanging on a thread. Now, Dr. Sato shouted. I raised my weapon. We were going to make this count. As the Xenoth soldiers stormed toward us, Dr. Sato activated the control panel. A blinding light filled the room as the rift collapsed on itself, folding in upon the energy that had sustained it. The Xenoth forces froze for a moment, as if caught in the rift's gravitational pull, and then everything stopped. The warship above us fired one final shot before the rift's energy completely absorbed the Xenoth forces. The blast shook the ground, but instead of annihilating us, it forced everything back. The battlefield was silent. For now. The battlefield was still, the only sounds coming from the distant rumble of the Xenoth warship retreating into orbit, and the faint hum of the rift now slowly closing. For a moment, it felt as though time itself had stopped. The chaotic energy of the battle fading into the eerie calm. We were alive. But at what cost? I stood amidst the ruins, my mind reeling from what we had just witnessed. The Xenoth forces were gone, disintegrated, sucked into the rift's destructive energy, their warship now just a smudge against the sky. We had won the battle, but not without sacrifice. I looked to the others. Starbuck was crouched by the wreckage, checking her ammunition, her expression unreadable. Garrus stood at the far side, his rifle still drawn, scanning the horizon. Both were waiting for me to speak, for some sense of closure. But I didn't have any answers. Not yet. What happened? Starbuck finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. That wasn't like any fight we've ever been in. I swallowed hard, trying to steady myself. That wasn't a fight. That was an awakening. Dr. Sato approached us cautiously, wiping sweat from her brow. She looked physically drained, but her eyes were alight with something else, an unsettling realization. I've stabilized the rift, she said, though her voice lacked the usual confidence. For now, the energy has been contained, but I don't know for how long. It's still unstable. I glanced at the rift above us. It had begun to shrink, its tendrils of raw energy folding back into themselves. The rift wasn't just a hole in space, it was alive, constantly shifting, and now, after everything that had happened, it was starting to close. But I knew better than to think it was over. This wasn't just some cosmic anomaly. It was a threat unlike anything humanity had ever faced. What's inside it? Garrus asked, his voice as sharp as ever. He had always been pragmatic, seeing everything through the lens of survival. Sato hesitated, then met my gaze. It's not just a rift, it's a tear that links our world to something much older. And when the entity broke free, it was only the beginning. I frowned. What do you mean? What is it? And why did the Xenoth fear it so much? Dr. Sato took a deep breath, her hands trembling as she activated a holographic display from the terminal. She pointed to the ancient markings we had uncovered inside the ruins, ones we had assumed were just alien designs. But now, the symbols began to shift and rearrange themselves, revealing something more. It's not just the Xenoth who fear this entity, Dr. Sato explained, her voice growing quieter. The Xenoth have been trying to prevent the entity from returning for centuries. It's an ancient being, one that predates all known species. It exists between dimensions, a force that can bend space and time to its will. I didn't like the sound of that. The Xenoth, a race built on fear and destruction, had tried to lock this entity away, to keep it contained. And we had just opened the door. As the truth settled in, we didn't have much time to reflect. The distant hum of engines grew louder. The Xenoth warship was not retreating. It had simply regrouped. And now, it was preparing for its next strike. We need to get to the shuttle, I said, turning sharply. If we don't leave now, we'll be sitting ducks. Dr. Sato shook her head. We can't leave yet. If we do, the rift could destabilize again, and this time, it might be permanent. I don't care about the rift right now, I said, frustration creeping into my voice. We need to get out before the Xenoth return in full force. We've seen what they're capable of. If we stay here, we're dead. Starbuck gave me a pointed look, so we run. No, I replied, my voice steely. We fight, but this time, we do it on our terms. We have a chance to hit them where it hurts. We can't let them regain control of the planet and the weapon again. I turned back to the terminal. The Xenoth were massing for another attack. But this time, we had something they didn't acknowledge. The weapon we had discovered was part of a larger network, and if we could find the core, we might be able to turn it against the Xenoth. I'm not abandoning this mission, Dr. Sato insisted. The entity has already shown its power, and I'm not about to let it go unchecked. This rift, this is humanity's only chance to secure a future. We have to control it before the Xenoth do. Garrus didn't hesitate. Then we fight. Chapter 24. Into the heart of the ruins, we gathered our equipment and began the trek deeper into the ruins. We were headed for the control core, the central hub that Dr. Sato believed held the key to stabilizing or eliminating the rift. Every step we took was deliberate, but our movements were rushed. The Xenoth were closing in, and we had no idea how long we had before they arrived in full force. As we made our way through the labyrinthine passages, I couldn't help but feel the weight of the situation. The Xenoth might have the technology, the firepower, but they didn't have what we did. They didn't have the human will to survive. They didn't have the unpredictability that had seen us through so many battles. The ruins opened up into a massive chamber, its walls lined with alien technology. The Xenoth had been here before, but now, it was humanity's turn to wield this power. The center of the room contained a massive crystal, the core. I could feel its energy vibrating through the air, its power almost tangible. This is it, Dr. Sato said, her voice filled with awe. The key to controlling the rift. We approached cautiously, but as we neared the crystal, something shifted. A low hum began to fill the room, and the air grew colder. I glanced back at the entrance. The Xenoth were here. I told you there was no escaping me. The entity's voice boomed through the chamber, sending waves of disorienting energy cascading through the walls. The Xenoth soldiers stormed into the room, weapons raised. But they weren't the ones I was worried about. The entity had fully awakened, and now, it was turning its focus on us. We need to move fast, I ordered. Get to the core, now. The room was filled with the sound of gunfire as the Xenoth soldiers advanced. Starbuck and Garrus opened fire, providing cover as Dr. Sato worked to access the core. Every second felt like an eternity, the entity's presence growing stronger, more oppressive. I fought my way forward, but it wasn't enough. The Xenoth were relentless. They weren't just after the core, they wanted the weapon and the power it held. They knew the truth now, and they weren't about to let us walk away with it. We can't hold them off forever. Starbuck shouted, her voice tinged with frustration. I know, I snapped back. But we don't have a choice. Dr. Sato was still working, her fingers flying over the console. Almost there, ... She murmured, her face flushed with the strain. Just a few more seconds, ... Just as the Xenoth closed in, Dr. Sato slammed her hand down on the control panel. The entire room lit up with blinding light, and the energy from the rift surged outward. creating a barrier between us and the Xenoth forces. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. Then, the rift collapsed on itself, pulling the Xenoth warship and the remaining soldiers into the void. The energy in the room subsided, leaving only the echo of the entity's last words. "You cannot escape me." But this time, it was different. The entity's presence began to fade, retreating back into the rift, unable to maintain its hold on our world. "We did it," Dr. Sato said, her voice weak but triumphant. The Xenoth forces were gone, but the damage had been done. The rift had been contained, but not destroyed. Humanity had survived, for now. The silence in the aftermath of the battle was deafening. The Xenoth warship had been destroyed, and the rift had been stabilized for now. But as I looked around, I knew the victory was temporary. The damage had already been done. I stood near the terminal, my gaze fixed on the swirling energies of the rift as it slowly began to recede. The Xenoth forces had been swallowed up by its immense power. But there was no telling what the entity's release would do to the fabric of space. Even though we had contained the rift, the truth lingered. The Xenoth would return, and so would the entity, if given the chance. "We've done it," Dr. Sato said, breathing heavily as she straightened from the terminal. "For now. But this isn't over. We've just delayed the inevitable." I turned to face the crew. Starbuck was leaning against a wall, wiping the sweat from her brow. Her rifle hung loosely at her side, but the tension in her posture was undeniable. Garrus had already reloaded his weapon, his eyes scanning the horizon. "For now is all we can ask for," I replied, though the words tasted bitter. "But we're not done, not by a long shot." The aftermath of the battle left the air thick with dust. We were standing in the ruins of an ancient civilization, a place that had once held the secrets to controlling forces that were now beyond our comprehension. We had survived the first wave, but the true threat still loomed in the shadows. The Xenoth were down, but not out, and the rift's energy was still pulsing, waiting for something or someone to tip the scales once more. "We need to find out everything we can about this place," Dr. Sato said, her voice steady, though I could hear the strain beneath it. "There's more here, something we're not seeing. These ruins, this technology, it's too advanced, too dangerous." Garrus nodded in agreement. "And the Xenoth are going to want it back. You can bet on that." "We can't stay here forever," Starbuck muttered. "They'll come for us. And next time, we might not be so lucky." I glanced up at the rift, still rippling in the sky, as if beckoning something from beyond. The energy here felt wrong, powerful, ancient, and now unstable. Humanity had tapped into something far bigger than we realized. "Dr. Sato, what else is there?" I asked, my voice sharp. She hesitated for a moment, her eyes flicking back to the terminal. I don't know. But the rift isn't just a gateway. It's a weapon that could alter space and time itself." I felt a chill creep up my spine. If that was true, then we had barely scratched the surface of the power that the Xenoth had been trying to keep contained. The idea that such a weapon existed made my stomach churn. "We need to take this to command," I said, setting my jaw. "This can't stay hidden. We need to warn humanity. The Xenoth will come for this. And if they're not careful, they'll use it to destroy us all." As we prepared to leave the ruins, I noticed a movement out of the corner of my eye. The Xenoth hadn't just retreated, they were regrouping, assembling their forces on the outskirts of the planet. Their warships were forming a tight perimeter, and I could sense the Xenoth preparing for a final strike. "We don't have much time," Garrus said, his voice low but firm. "They're assembling their fleet. We're sitting ducks here," Starbuck added. "We can't outrun them, and we don't have the firepower to hold them off." I looked back at Dr. Sato. She was still staring at the terminal, her face pale, and I could see the weight of the discovery bearing down on her. "There's one more thing," she said quietly. "The beacon wasn't just a signal. It was a call to others." I frowned. "Others?" She nodded, her expression grim. "The Xenoth weren't the only ones listening. The entity we awakened isn't the only ancient force out there. The rift, it's connected to something much bigger." I felt a pit form in my stomach. The implications of what she was saying were too vast, too incomprehensible. The Xenoth had been trying to contain a power greater than themselves, and now we had let it slip free. "Then we need to stop it. All of it," I said, my voice steady despite the fear rising in my chest. "We stop the Xenoth, we stop the rift, and we keep the rest of humanity safe." Starbuck stepped forward, her hand resting on her weapon. "How?" "The Xenoth are coming, and they're not going to stop until they get what they want. I met her gaze. We fight. As the Xenoth warships descended, we made our final preparations. The shuttle was prepped for launch, and we gathered what little supplies we had left. I could feel the urgency growing with every passing second. The Xenoth would be here soon, and once they were, there would be no turning back. This is it, Dr. Sato said, her voice soft but determined. We have one chance. Garrus and Starbuck were already working on the tactical plan, setting up a perimeter around the shuttle. We were going to give everything we had to stop the Xenoth from reclaiming this planet, from taking the weapon, from using it to destroy humanity. The rumble of the Xenoth ships grew louder as they neared. The Xenoth soldiers began to descend, their armored figures encircling us. They didn't speak, didn't waste time. Their mission was clear. As I looked around, I saw my crew standing together. Each of us was ready to make our stand. The odds were against us, but that had never stopped humanity before, and it wasn't going to stop us now. We make our stand here, I said, my voice steady. We protect this place with everything we've got. We were no longer running. We were fighting for the future of humanity, and for the truth we had uncovered, a truth that, if left unchecked, could unravel everything we had worked for. The Xenoth descended upon us like a wave, their firepower overwhelming. They came from all sides, their weapons blazing, their soldiers advancing with terrifying precision. But we were ready. We had no choice but to stand our ground. The fight was fierce. Garrus held the rear, covering our escape route, while Star took the front line, her shots ringing out with deadly accuracy. The Xenoth soldiers fell one by one, but for every one we killed, there were 10 more to replace them. I fired into the advancing Xenoth, my shots tearing through their armor, but it wasn't enough. We couldn't hold them forever. They were too strong, too relentless. Then, Dr. Sato stepped forward, holding her hand to the terminal. I've got one last thing, she said, a grim determination on her face. It's a failsafe built into the system. If I activate it, it could neutralize the rift permanently, but it will take everything. It will tear this place apart. I turned to face her, the weight of the decision heavy in my chest. Do it. We'll cover you. She nodded, and with a final, hesitant breath, she pressed the final command. The ground trembled as the rift collapsed in on itself. The Xenoth soldiers tried to flee, but the energy surged, consuming everything in its path. The Xenoth warships began to explode, their engines collapsing as the rift's energy drained them of all power. In those final moments, as the ground cracked beneath our feet, I realized that we had done it. The rift was no more. The Xenoth were gone, and humanity, for now, was safe, but at a great cost. The planet shook one last time, the final energy wave breaking the surface apart. We were thrown to the ground as the station crumbled. I could hear Starbuck and Garrus shouting, but their voices were drowned by the deafening roar of the collapsing rift. In those last moments, I thought of everything we had lost, but more importantly, I thought of everything we had won. The air was still thick with dust and the crackling remnants of energy. The ruins that had once stood tall, proud and ancient, were now nothing more than rubble, scattered across the barren landscape. The Xenoth had been defeated, and the rift had collapsed, but the cost had been staggering. The shuttle was the only thing left intact. Its engines had been damaged during the battle, and the makeshift repairs barely kept it together, but it was all we had left. The planet was falling apart around us. The ground beneath our feet cracked and trembled, and I could feel the very air shift with the aftermath of the collapse. The power of the rift, combined with the destruction we had wrought, had begun to tear at the fabric of reality itself. As I stood among the wreckage, the enormity of what we had just survived began to hit me. We had won, but at a terrible price. Dr. Sato was the first to speak, her voice shaking from exhaustion. It's over, she said, her eyes red from the strain. We stopped the rift, but I don't think the damage can be undone. Not completely. I nodded, looking at the horizon where the Xenoth warships had once hovered. They were gone, consumed by the energy from the rift. The Xenoth soldiers had been scattered, their fleet destroyed. But we had no idea what this victory had truly cost. Starbuck was silent, her eyes scanning the wasteland around us. She looked tired, more tired than I had ever seen her. The usual fire that burned behind her eyes was now dimmed by the weight of what we had endured. She had always been the wild card, the unpredictable force that kept everyone on their toes. But now, she was different. We all were. We need to leave, she said quietly, her voice heavy with the unspoken burden of everything that had happened. This place is dead. There's nothing left for us here. Garrus stood to my side, his weapon still raised, though he knew the danger was over for now. She's right. We need to get out of here before whatever happens next takes us all. With it, I turned to face the group. They were all survivors. We had been through hell, and now, somehow, we were still standing. But I couldn't shake the feeling that we hadn't finished what we'd started. The Xenoth had been defeated, but their ancient fear and their connection to the entity still lingered in the air like a poison. "We're not done," I said, the weight of the words hanging between us. The Xenoth were afraid of this rift for a reason. They feared what was inside it. We've seen the power it holds, and we can't ignore that. Humanity can't afford to leave it unchecked. As the crew prepared for the journey back to the shuttle, I couldn't shake the nagging thought that the real battle was just beginning. We had faced the Xenoth, and we had survived. But the real threat, the entity, still lingered. It was not dead, merely dormant, waiting for the right moment to strike again. And it was not just a weapon of destruction. It was a force that could tear apart the very fabric of space and time. The truth was clear. We couldn't just leave it behind. We had to figure out what the entity was, and what its existence meant for the future of humanity. Dr. Sato had been working tirelessly on the shuttle's systems, trying to stabilize the energy readings. But even as she worked, I could see the strain in her eyes. This had taken a toll on all of us. "We've only delayed the inevitable," Dr. Sato said softly, her voice filled with frustration. The Xenoth weren't the only ones who feared this power, the RIFT. It's a doorway, and if we're not careful, it will open again. I turned to her, my heart heavy with the knowledge of what was at stake. "So, what do we do now? How do we stop something like this?" She looked at me, her eyes filled with the burden of the truth. "We don't stop it. We contain it. But it's going to take more than just one mission. We need resources, we need a strategy, and we need to be ready for whatever comes next." This is just the beginning. As we prepared to leave the planet, an unexpected transmission came through on the comms. At first, I thought it was another anomaly, another system glitch. But the message was clear. Unmistakable. That was from Commander Zira, of the Xenoth fleet. "Captain Shepard," the voice crackled. "Through the comms we know what you have done. You have defeated us, but you do not understand the full consequences of your actions. The rift you have sealed is only a small part of the greater picture." The voice paused, and I could hear the low rumble of the Xenoth warship's engines in the background. I could sense the hesitation in Zera's voice, a mixture of fear and respect. "You think the Xenoth are the only ones who have been watching this rift? The entity it contains is something far older, far more dangerous, and you have only just begun to see its power. The Xenoth are not your enemy in this. Shepard, we may be your only ally if you want to survive what is coming." I stared at the comms console in disbelief. The Xenoth, an ally? I had no idea what to make of this. After everything, after the war, after everything they had done to humanity, they were offering an alliance. "I'll think about it," I said, my voice tight. "But right now, we need to get off this planet. We've got bigger problems." As we boarded the shuttle, the Xenoth warship drifted away into the distance. It was clear that they were still calculating their next move. But for now, we had one thing in our favor: time. We had bought ourselves a temporary victory. But the war, the real war, was just beginning. Dr. Sato was already at the terminal, working to stabilize the shuttle's systems. Her fingers flew across the console, but her mind was clearly elsewhere. "We can't stay here," she said, her voice distant. "The rift is closed for now, but I'm afraid that this won't be the last we see of it. We need to go to Earth, to command, and warn them." I nodded. "We'll need all the support we can get." Starbuck turned to face me, her expression unreadable. "You really think the Xenoth will help us?" "I don't know," I said, my voice grim. "But we have no choice. If we're going to survive this, we need to be prepared for everything." As the shuttle ascended, I looked back at the planet below. Kepler22b had once been a forgotten world, a silent, lifeless rock. But now, it was the epicenter of a conflict that would shape the future of the galaxy. We were heading into the unknown. But one thing was certain. We had no idea just how deep this mystery went, and whether the Xenoth would become our allies or our enemies. We were about to face something far bigger than either of us could comprehend. I glanced at the crew, all of them lost in their thoughts. We had survived this battle, but the real war had only just begun. We had barely left Kepler22b behind us when the full weight of the situation began to sink in. The shuttle's engines hummed steadily as we made our way toward the nearest jump gate. The planet had been left in ruin, and the Xenoth were regrouping. But There was something worse, something bigger, lurking in the shadows. The entity we had released wasn't done. It was still waiting, pulling at the very fabric of the universe. Its influence could already be felt, even in the relative calm of the shuttle. The rift may have been contained, but its energy had begun to bleed into the world around us. We didn't talk much during the flight. No one had the words to describe what had happened. The feeling of relief from surviving the battle had faded, replaced by the cold, harsh reality that humanity was now facing a threat far beyond anything we had ever prepared for. Dr. Sato was seated at the back of the shuttle, her eyes locked on the datapads, trying to make sense of the alien technology she had unearthed. She had always been driven, but this mission had taken a toll on her. Her hands trembled slightly as she scrolled through data, but her mind was elsewhere, piecing together the puzzle we had uncovered. Starbuck and Garrus were silent. I could tell they were both thinking about the Xenoth offer. The idea of an alliance with the very species that had almost destroyed us was unthinkable. But Garrus, ever the strategist, seemed to be weighing the potential advantages. The truth was, we didn't have many choices. If the Xenoth were right, if the entity was truly as dangerous as they claimed, then we were all in this together. Whether we liked it or not. We need to prepare, I said, breaking the silence. My voice was steady, but beneath it, there was an edge of urgency. We're heading to Earth, but that's not enough. We need to warn Command. We need to make sure humanity is ready. As we neared the jump gate, I called for a briefing. We couldn't delay this. The Xenoth's message was still fresh in my mind. They had made their intentions clear. They weren't our enemies anymore. They were offering us something, alliance, but I had no idea what they truly wanted. Captain Shepard, the voice of Commander Zira, crackled through the comms, breaking the tension in the air. We are prepared to meet you at the nearest station. We can offer our assistance, but only if you agree to discuss terms. You are correct. The entity is more than just a weapon. It is a force that threatens both of our peoples. Humanity has a role to play in this. I turned to the crew. Starbuck didn't need to be told what I was thinking. I don't like it, she said, her tone blunt. Trusting the Xenoth after everything. This feels like a trap. Garrus met my gaze, his eyes calculating. It's not a trap, he said, his voice steady. It's a chance. The Xenoth know something we don't. If we can work with them, we might stand a better chance against the real threat, the entity. I agree, Dr. Sato said, glancing up from her data. They've been tracking the rift for centuries. They're not entirely wrong. We may not be able to stop this thing without their help. I sighed. The thought of an alliance with the Xenoth made my stomach turn, but I couldn't ignore the logic. We had just barely survived the initial encounter, and the entity was still out there, far more dangerous than any of us had originally anticipated. I'll accept the meeting, I said finally, my voice firm. We don't have the luxury of being choosy. We need every advantage we can get. The shuttle docked at a remote station on the edge of humanity's territory. The Xenoth warship loomed nearby, its dark, angular form casting a long shadow over the station's landing platform. We were about to meet with Commander Zira, the leader of the Xenoth faction that had offered us an alliance. The Xenoth had made it clear that they were the only ones who had the knowledge we needed. The key to controlling the rift and preventing the entity from tearing the galaxy apart. But there was no telling what the Xenoth wanted in return. As we stepped out of the shuttle, the air on the station felt heavier. It wasn't just the tension. It was something else. A lingering unease. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were walking into a trap, even if it wasn't intentional. The Xenoth had their own agenda, and I wasn't sure we could trust them. Welcome, Captain Shepard, a voice echoed across the landing platform. It was Commander Zira, her tall, imposing figure silhouetted by the glowing lights of the warship. Behind her, I nodded in response. Commander Zira, I said, my voice steady. Let's make this quick. We don't have time to waste. Zira stepped forward, her alien eyes sharp and calculating. Indeed, the entity is growing stronger, and our time is running out. I've come to offer you the same bargain that was offered to your people long ago, an alliance. I crossed my arms, eyeing her cautiously. And what's in it for you? Why the sudden change of heart? Zira's expression remained unreadable. The Xenoth seeks survival. Captain Shepard, we are not here to conquer. We are here to protect what remains of our people. The entity threatens not only you, but us as well. The power you have unlocked is something we cannot face alone. Humanity has a part to play in this, and if you choose to accept, we will share our knowledge with you. Together, we can prevent the galaxy from falling into chaos. Her words hung in the air, heavy with the promise of power, but also danger. I glanced at my crew. Starbuck was skeptical, but Garrus seemed more inclined to trust her. Dr. Sato was already analyzing the data the Xenoth had provided, her mind clearly working to figure out their true intentions. I turned back to Zira. We accept your offer, for now, but this better be the truth. Zira nodded once, her eyes glinting with something I couldn't read. I will take you to the command center. There is much to discuss. Inside the Xenoth warship, I couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease. The ship was alive with energy, its dark corridors illuminated by alien lights that pulsed with an eerie rhythm. It was beautiful, in a terrifying way, sleek and mechanical, yet alive with a sense of purpose. But I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being led down a path that we couldn't turn back from. We were led to a large chamber, where Zira took her seat at a central console. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing maps, energy readings, and unknown symbols. Dr. Sato was already studying the data with a mixture of awe and fear. She could feel it, too. The entity is not a simple being, Zira explained, her voice calm. It is a force of creation and destruction, born from the deepest voids of the universe. We sealed it away centuries ago, but you humans have awakened it. You may be the key to either sealing it once again, or unleashing it upon all of existence. I met her gaze. What do we need to do? Zira's fingers hovered over the console, and the holographic display shifted to show a series of coordinates. There is another rift, one deeper than the one you encountered on Kepler22b. If we do not reach it before the entity does, it will rip apart the fabric of reality. We have to work together to find it. The weight of her words hit me like a ton of bricks. We were now in a race against time, with the Xenoth and the entity as our primary adversaries. And I had no idea if humanity had what it took to survive this battle. As the meeting ended, the weight of the task ahead of us loomed larger. We had agreed to the Xenoth alliance, but I still couldn't shake the feeling that we were walking into something far worse than we could ever imagine. The Xenoth had shared their knowledge, but there was a price. The rift was growing, and the entity was pulling at the very fabric of reality. The Xenoth didn't just want to survive, they wanted to control this power. And now, humanity's fate was tied to them. We'll need everything we have to stop this, I said, looking at my crew. But it's not just about fighting anymore. It's about saving what's left of the galaxy. We had been given a chance, but the real battle was just beginning. The air inside the Xenoth warship felt dense with purpose. The corridors we walked through were cold, eerily quiet, and alive with a sense of ancient technology. The crew, usually filled with uncertainty but willing to fight, had grown more somber as we prepared for what lay ahead. Commander Zera's offer had been straightforward, an alliance to stop the entity from fully awakening. Yet the more I learned, the more I realized that this alliance was anything but simple. The Xenoth had made it clear that their own survival depended on this. But what did they really want from humanity? It was hard to trust them. Dr. Sato, ever the scientist, had spent hours scanning their data. But even she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this than they were letting on. Starbuck, ever the skeptic, was sharpening her weapon as we prepared to leave the Xenoth warship and head to the next rift. We can't trust them, she muttered under her breath, her eyes scanning the darkened hallway. Not fully. We've seen what they can do. What if this is just another way for them to control us? I don't know, I replied quietly, watching as the glowing light of the ship illuminated the path ahead. But we don't have a choice. We have to stop the entity before it consumes everything. Garrus was silent for a moment, then spoke up. If they want our help, then they're going to have to prove they're not just playing us like pawns. His voice was resolute, and despite everything, I found myself agreeing with him. The Xenoth had power, and they were willing to use it, but the real question was, were they truly trying to stop the entity? Or were they playing a dangerous game of their own? As we reached the warship's docking bay, the ramp descended, and I felt the cold wind of space hit my face. The Xenoth had given us coordinates, a new rift, one that was even more dangerous than the one we had just sealed. This was where the entity was heading, the heart of the storm. We need to move fast, I said. This rift is the key. If we're going to stop this thing, we need to find it before the entity does. The shuttle was prepped and ready, waiting for us to board and take off. But I knew there was no way we could outrun the Xenoth or the entity, not if they both decided to strike. The journey to the next rift felt longer than it was. The unknown stretched out before us, and every passing second felt like a ticking clock. The crew was tense, but there was a shared understanding. Whatever happened, we would stand together. We had no other choice. We have to keep the Xenoth at bay, Starbuck said, as we entered the shuttle's cockpit. If they try anything, we'll be ready, I said, interrupting her. We need to focus on the rift first. If we don't stop the entity, it's going to consume everything. This is humanity's last chance to survive. Dr. Sato's fingers moved swiftly across the shuttle's console. Her eyes locked on the display as she traced the energy signatures from the rift. This one is different, she murmured, almost to herself. The energy readings. They're beyond anything we've encountered. How different? Garrus asked, leaning over her shoulder. Sato didn't answer immediately. Instead, she rechecked the data, her brow furrowing deeper as she processed the information. This rift is a gateway, not just to another part of space, but to something far older. Something that even the Xenoth fear. I leaned forward, my mind racing. The Xenoth weren't afraid of anything, unless it was truly terrifying. This was no longer just about an alien threat. This was about something much deeper. What are we walking into? I asked. Dr. Sato looked up, her eyes filled with uncertainty. I don't know. But if the entity wants to get to it, then we're in more danger than we realize. We were heading straight for the heart of the storm. We arrived at the coordinates, and what we saw made my blood run cold. The rift wasn't just a tear in space-time. It was a swirling mass of energy, pulsing and undulating like a living organism. The entity's presence could be felt here, emanating from the rift like a dark gravity that pulled everything toward it. We're here, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. This is it. This is where we either stop it or become its prey. The shuttle hovered near the rift's edge. The pull of the energy was unlike anything I had ever felt before. It wasn't just a warping of space. It was alive. Dr. Sato quickly began scanning the rift's energy signatures. I've never seen anything like this. It's like the rift is a doorway into another universe. One that's completely alien. Garrus stepped forward, his eyes scanning the rift. We need to figure out how to close it. Fast. If we don't, we'll be stuck here forever. That's not the only problem, I said, turning to face them. The Xenoth are already on their way. They want this rift, and they'll stop at nothing to take control of it. We can't let them. Dr. Sato nodded, her face set with determination. I can try to reroute the energy from the rift's core. If I can access the control points, I might be able to collapse it. But it won't be easy. The Xenoth will be right on top of us. The tension in the shuttle was palpable as the countdown began. The Xenoth warships were approaching, their engines burning brightly against the dark backdrop of space. The final confrontation was inevitable. The entity was our greatest threat, but the Xenoth were not far behind. We had no time to waste. We had to act fast. As we prepared to board the landing platform near the rift, the Xenoth warships closed in, their weapons charged, and the Xenoth soldiers began to deploy, advancing on us like an unstoppable tide. We've got company, Starbuck said, her voice sharp, and they're not in a talking mood. I felt the familiar weight of my weapon in my hands. We hold them off. Dr. Sato, do your thing. We'll cover you. The shuttle doors opened, and the crew moved swiftly into position. Garrus and Starbuck took the front line while I stood back to provide cover for Dr. Sato as she worked on the rift's control panel. The Xenoth were relentless, their laser fire tearing through the air. Dr. Sato typed furiously, her brow furrowed in concentration. I need more time, she shouted. I raised my weapon, firing into the advancing Xenoth soldiers. The Xenoth warship hovered above us, its weapons primed for the kill. It wasn't just about holding our ground anymore. This was the final battle. Humanity's last stand against the Xenoth and the entity. The energy from the rift surged again, and I could feel the world around me begin to shift. It was like the very fabric of space was unraveling. The Xenoth weren't just trying to stop us. They were trying to control the entity for themselves. Almost there. Dr. Sato's voice trembled through the comps. The final showdown was upon us. The Xenoth were relentless, their forces overwhelming, but we fought back with everything we had. The energy from the rift was volatile, swirling out of control as Dr. Sato desperately worked to stabilize it. We're running out of time, Garrus shouted, his voice barely audible over the gunfire. Get it done, Sato. The final moments of the battle felt like an eternity. The Xenoth closed in, their soldiers advancing relentlessly, but Starbuck and Garrus held them off with fierce determination. The sound of battle was deafening, a chaos of energy blasts, explosions, and shouts. It's done, Dr. Sato shouted with a final surge of energy. The rift began to collapse, sucking in the remaining Xenoth soldiers and destabilizing their warship. The rift's energy began to fade, and the terrifying presence of the entity weakened, retreating into the void from which it had come. But the Xenoth had been defeated, and humanity had won. For now,